Lost them, sir.
Damn it! Well, then you find them, and you get them back in the dome. And to make sure nobody else gets out, I want roving death squads around the perimeter 24/7. I want 10,000 tough guys, and I want 10,000 soft guys to make the tough guys look tougher. And here's how I want them arranged. Tough, tough, soft, tough, soft, soft, tough, tough, soft, soft, tough, soft.
Sir, I'm afraid you've gone mad with power.
Of course I have. You ever tried going mad without power? It's boring. No one listens to you.
Hello, I'm Cinemod470. I don't know how it's possible to have low expectations and still be disappointed, but that's the best way to describe Season 2 of Daredevil Born Again. Though Season 1's problems could be rationalized by its early production not being able to decide which continuity to use, Season 2 proves that the writers of this show don't understand the characters, their history, or basic American law and politics. For this video, I'll be going over each of the season's plot points and important characters, so there will of course be spoilers ahead. I would also recommend you watch my video on Season 1 if you haven't, as it will provide context on this season. And if you like what I do, hit the like button, comment your thoughts down below, and subscribe if you haven't. It costs you nothing, but for me, it tells the algorithm to push my content to more people. Also, I do apologize for publishing so late. I had to do a bunch of research into America's laws and political systems. However, with Google's search engine relying on AI, there's a good chance my information may be wrong, so feel free to correct my mistakes. 6 months into Mayor Fisk's martial law, he begins using the Red Hook Freeport to smuggle military-grade weapons into New York while keeping his prisoners there until their vigilante trial. While Daredevil and Karen are building a resistance against Fisk, and are trying to prove his guilt so the governor will revoke the Red Hook Charter and remove Fisk's power base. Daredevil infiltrates the Northern Star, the ship carrying the weapons, and the captain scuttles it per Fisk's orders. The Kingpin then blames the whole thing on Daredevil, calling it a terrorist attack. While behind the scenes, Fisk is actively hunting down the captain and first mate to ensure their silence. So Matt and Karen work with the resistance to find them first. Fisk is also actively pushing for the vigilante trials to proceed in his favor to further the terrorism narrative. Now, when it comes to how much freedom Fisk has as mayor, it's pretty inconsistent. We see that he's ensured his staff are all loyal to him, either through money, fear, or genuine belief. And we know from last season that he blackmailed City Hall to push his Safer Streets initiative, giving the anti-vigilante task force complete freedom and declare martial law. There's also the possibility that the judges adjudicating the vigilante trials are acting in Fisk's favor out of fear, which can be surmised from their performance, the way they're shot, and how they handle Jack Duquesne and Karen Page's trials respectively, as they only start acting against Fisk when they saw Matt had a chance to stop him.
The only thing that's been presented is testimony from Officer Powell, who is in your employ, who takes his orders from you. It is the allegation of the district attorney, who, guess what, is in your employ, takes his orders from you.
Objection!
Overruled.
Your Honor, at this point, I would like to introduce evidence regarding the Northern Star, video testimony from the ship's first mate, Christophe Sava.
Objection! Video testimony?
Overruled.
There's also Kingpin CIA contact Mr. Charles, who is the middleman for the Northern Star's weapons and keeps the Attorney General from interfering in Fisk's operations. But where the inconsistency comes from is the governor's inaction to Fisk's illegal activities, specifically the actions of the task force. The series makes it abundantly clear that she is the key to remove Fisk's power by revoking the Red Hook Charter, and from both her behavior and the fact that Fisk's team can't find anything to blackmail her with, she's presented as a morally upstanding person. But for most of the season, she doesn't do anything to restrain Fisk's power, despite knowing that Mr. Charles was strong-arming the Attorney General to give Fisk free reign over the vigilante trials, and knows that Fisk Industries has dealings in Red Hook, which the series presents as an area outside the government's jurisdiction because it's a freeport, which isn't how freeports work, but I explained all that in last season's video. Now, after doing some research, the governor does have the power to suspend or remove the mayor of New York from office in response to allegations of misconduct. But she doesn't act against him until later in the season when she witnesses Karen's vigilante trial and sees how suspicious the AVTF are during their testimony. And the reason she waited so long was because aside from the task force's unethical actions, Fisk has done some good for the city and the voters love him.
I've turned a blind eye to your emergency powers, safer streets, vigilante trials, because on paper, and with most of the voting public, It's working.
But considering the governor is a relatively good person, so good that Fisk can't find anything to blackmail her with, and resorted to an attempted assassination to replace her, the task force's reported actions up until Karen's trial should be enough to remove Fisk for misconduct, as the level of harm the AVTF caused to the citizens of New York is too much to ignore. Like the fact that most of the people they're arresting with no oversight or due process are being kept in an undisclosed location, or that most of them aren't even suspected vigilantes. And at this point in the MCU timeline, what is defined as a vigilante is pretty well established. But at no point does anyone ask, oh yeah, which costume vigilante is this random person? Sure, they bring it up during Jack Duquesne's trial because he's the swordsman, and Karen's trial because she works with Daredevil, but what about the others still awaiting trial? Now, if the anti-vigilante task force were focused solely on actual vigilantes, then the governor's hesitance would be more understandable, but the show just calls every character who wears a costume a vigilante, like Muse and Bullseye, even though they weren't interested in preventing crime without legal authority. Muse was a serial killer, and Bullseye was an assassin. And while we're on the subject, I brought this up in my Season 1 video about why it was stupid for Fisk to make his anti-vigilante task force out of cops who glorify the Punisher, and that they should have been different entities. And that's even more relevant in this season, because by having more vigilantes for the AVTF to hunt, especially when most of them are cops, it justifies their existence to the public, and why they need to be a separate entity from local law enforcement. And somehow, the show manages to double down on the stupidity with the AVTF by having the Punisher's logo on their uniform. Seriously, it's right there, next to the F, which stands for Frank. And no one calls out how hypocritical it is that the anti-vigilante task force is appropriating a well-known vigilante symbol.
Have you noticed that our caps have actually got little pictures of skulls on them?
I don't,
Hands. Are we the baddies?
A lot of spectators have, however, ignored the issues of Kingpin getting away with all of his actions, likely due to witnessing and in some cases experiencing the unethical actions of the Trump administration, specifically when it comes to the comparison of the AVTF and ICE, since Trump didn't receive any pushback or consequences for the harm the organization has caused. Now don't get me wrong, the AVTF do properly showcase why it's dangerous for a law enforcement agency to have no oversight or due process. But there are two important differences between Fisk being mayor and Trump being president. The biggest one being the amount of political power they have and why they have it. When Trump was re-elected, he appointed nearly every high-level position of the American government and Justice Department with people who are loyal to him, so no one can really prevent any of his actions going forward. And since the 2024 election, the Republican Party have the majority seats in both the House and the Senate, and more than half the House have to vote for Trump to be impeached, then 2/3 of the whole Senate have to vote to convict. So if a trial were to take place, it's unlikely Trump would be convicted. Whereas Fisk's political power should be a lot more limited considering where he is on the pecking order, and should be under scrutiny by the FBI, the governor, and especially Homeland Security since he's now labeling the vigilantes as terrorists. The second difference is that superheroes exist in this world, and they should also be involved in the plot. In my video on Season 1, I spoke about how the other street-level heroes in New York should have been present because of the carnage from the task force and the city being blacked out, but they likely weren't due to scheduling, the show's budget, and the fact that Spider-Man's owned by another studio. And if that was the case, then the writers should have catered the stakes to what they could present on screen. And in Season 2, the stakes keep getting higher to the point where it goes beyond street level, and other heroes who are active at this point wouldn't be able to ignore what Fisk is doing. If you want a good example of a street level MCU plot, look at Spider-Man Homecoming. Even though at the time the Avengers were split in half, the Vulture knew to keep his operation as secret as possible because all it took was one Avenger to bring it down.
How many times have I told you not to fire him out in the open?
Hey, you said move the merchandise.
Under the radar. Under the radar. That's how we survive. If you bring damage control or the Avengers down here, we're through.
Now, to be fair, in this season, Jessica Jones and Luke Cage's absence is explained away as Charles was recruiting superpowered people to work for the government overseas, which could explain why the rest of the Defenders aren't present, as it's not outside the realm of possibility that he got Danny and Colleen to work for him if he applied enough leverage. There's also Jessica's B-plot where she has to look after her daughter Danielle on her own, and it's revealed that after she gave birth her powers started to diminish, so it's understandable why she wouldn't be in the trenches with Daredevil. But Charles wouldn't be able to leverage Spider-Man since no one remembers his identity, and he operates exclusively in New York, so there's no reason for him to be out of the fight. And Charles wouldn't be able to get to Frank since he stays under the radar. And speaking of Frank, he is also absent in Season 2. Seriously, he isn't present at all despite the fact that at the end of Season 1, Frank managed to escape Red Hook. And out of all the heroes in the MCU, he should be involved in the plot, since the AVTF are using his symbol to commit multiple crimes against humanity.
I mean, what does skulls make you think of? Death, cannibals, beheading, pirates.
Pirates are fun.
I didn't say we weren't fun, but fun or not, pirates are still the baddies.
My best guess for his absence is that John Bernthal wasn't available since he was working on One Last Kill and Brand New Day. With the amount of escalation that's occurred, like the people the task force arrested going missing, and the fact that Fisk declared 2 separate terrorist attacks on the same ship, Kingpin's actions would have caught the attention of the Avengers in whatever form they're taking. And the Avengers know who he is.
Well, that's the guy I've been worried about this whole time. Kingpin.
Just really think about it. Would Sam Wilson stand by while the mayor of New York was arresting citizens without due process? Would Bucky Barnes stand by while the Kingpin turned his hometown into Nazi Germany? I mean, hell, Kate Bishop should want to fight Fisk, considering their previous conflict where he tried to kill her mum, and the fact that in this season he locked up her former stepfather-to-be, which I'll get into in a bit. If it wasn't obvious, the writers are clearly not capable of writing a complex plot, and the lack of complexity is a lot more prevalent in this season with the side characters. In the original series, every notable character had moral complexity to them that made them interesting and more human, and in Season 3, the moral complexity of the side characters is what helps Fisk regain his power. D.A. Blake Tower didn't want to know the details of the FBI deal because he was running for re-election, but still acted against him when he found out about the FBI being compromised. Tammy Hatley was working for Fisk the entire time, but she was coerced by having her family threatened. And when she did try to fight back, one of her children were murdered. And Ray Nadeem had the most complexity out of anyone in the show. He was an FBI agent who was down in his luck financially due to him having to cover his sister-in-law's cancer treatment. So to get a promotion and increase his paycheck, he made a deal with Fisk to make him an informant. And though Fisk did provide actual evidence to dismantle a large criminal organization, Ray didn't realize that Fisk was using him to build his criminal empire back up and stronger than ever. But after Ray discovers the truth, he tries to tell the higher-ups, only for him to be framed, blackmailed, and pulled in deeper. And when he finally does undermine Fisk, his family gets put in danger and has to go into hiding. So Ray's only option is to confess everything in court without the possibility of immunity, because he wants to make amends for his actions and ensure the guilty get punished. And when his confession doesn't work, he gives his life for a dying declaration that sends Fisk to prison, which Born Again unfortunately retconned. But the point is, though Ray did bad things, he wasn't a bad man, just a flawed one. And it made him a great character, because his downfall and redemption came from a genuine human place. And the writers were competent enough to showcase why Ray made his decisions so the spectators can empathize with him instead of condemning him. But in Born Again, everyone's motivations are limited to either being good or evil. When we first met D.A. Hochberg in Season 1, his antagonism towards Matt makes sense since he viewed Hector as a cop killer. But in Season 2, he doesn't care about justice or the law, he's just a corrupt creep.
You think the evidence matters?
Wow. What happened to you?
I read the tea leaves.
Same with the AVTF. Most of them are former cops and they clearly hate it when someone kills one of their own, but none of them seem to have a problem with working for a man who's killed multiple cops. The only notable members who deviate from the group are Saunders, who isn't as radicalized as the rest, and Cole North, who switches sides after questioning Powell about whether Hector intentionally killed that cop from Season 1.
Tell him about Hector Ayala.
Hector Ayala was a fucking cop killer. I said shoot that bastard.
No, my husband wouldn't kill police.
You told me Ayala pushed him off the platform. I told you to shoot that guy.
Yeah, I forgot to mention in the Season 1 video that it was Cole who killed Hector. Which, by the way, if it was that easy for Cole to switch sides, why didn't he do it after witnessing Powell execute Saunders and use that as justification for attacking the crowd? Or even earlier when the task force was storing military ordnance? Cole only starts questioning whether or not the AVTF are evil when the plot demands he asks questions in the final episode. The only possible exception to this is the Kingpin's main enforcer, Buck Cashman, as he clearly doesn't enjoy killing people for Fisk, but has to so he can stay employed and alive. The season also takes the time to cultivate his relationships with other members of the supporting cast, so we get to see the intricacies of his personality. But again, he's the only possible exception. But moving back to Duquesne, he is the first actual vigilante to be put on trial, and it is clearly rigged against him as the judges keep giving leeway to the DA's arguments. And during the trial, Kirsten lets it slip that she was inside of Red Hook, which helps Daredevil's plan to infiltrate the pier to destroy the weapons. After the kangaroo court, Duquesne gets sent back to Red Hook and Kirsten drowns her sorrows, only for her to receive instructions for a rendezvous with Daredevil to describe the layout of the building. But because she was blindfolded, she can only describe it using her other senses.
Well, they had me wear blackout goggles, so I didn't see anything.
I can work with that.
Here's the issue with that. Kirsten wouldn't have been able to describe the layout to Daredevil unless she was actively remembering details as she was moving through the building. And after she lost the trial, she had been drinking pretty heavily, so her memory is going to be worse. Also, this plot point where Kirsten describes the building's layout to Daredevil is unnecessary, since he and Karen captured Saunders, who's also a turncoat, so they can get a better layout from him. But they don't, because all the plot needs from him is the keycard to get into the building. I'm not kidding, Daredevil and Karen never use him for anything else. And the only other time he's relevant is when Powell finds out about his betrayal, kills him, and uses his death to start his own Gorman massacre. There's also the fact that Daredevil's powers give him a near-perfect understanding of his environment, so he shouldn't need a description. I think the only reason they added this was to make Kirsten feel useful after a massive loss. But anyways, after infiltrating Red Hook, Daredevil not only finds the weapons from the Northern Star, but also all the people the task force arrested, and decides to leave the weapons alone in order to save them and escape. It's framed as this really difficult choice, since Daredevil's plan was to destroy the weapons and use the attention to alert the proper authorities, which contradicts his original plan to prove the weapons were being smuggled.
We get the message out there that the mayor is running guns. The weapons, all of it, is still on board, just outside the port.
So what's next?
Proving it.
You get inside. Then what?
I torch the weapons. Make a big noise. You get your sources to put it out there, and we force everyone in New York to see who he is.
Also, torching the weapons won't prove anything, because all the evidence will be destroyed. Sure, there might be some residual evidence if forensics can get their hands on the site, but because Born Again believes a free port is a sovereign nation, it isn't. It's outside the NYPD's jurisdiction, so Fisk wouldn't let them in. So it would have been better if Daredevil stuck to the original plan and got photos or video evidence of the weapons to send to the governor. As for saving the prisoners, it's not only the morally correct choice, but also the better tactical choice, as they have multiple testimonies to give the governor to prove Fisk's misconduct, several of whom are New York's wealthy elite that Fisk imprisoned to use as leverage for his port project before he created the Safer Streets initiative. But that only comes up during Duquesne's trial and never has a meaningful impact on Matt's goal to incriminate Fisk. The main purpose of the video testimonies they do record is just used to publicly smear Fisk during a protest. And after the rescue, Duquesne, one of the few vigilantes in this show, leaves New York, and his only contribution to the cause is money.
I have been in a cage for 6 months. I need a shower, I need to burn these clothes. Too old for this shit. I gave Karen an account number. Use whatever you need, whenever you need it.
Don't get me wrong, the money should be useful, but it does highlight the possibility that the writers didn't know what to do with him. If anything, he could have at least helped protect the other escaped prisoners. When it comes to the escape, the single-shot fight scene is well choreographed, as we get a good contrast of Daredevil and Duquesne's fighting styles as they move through the fleeing prisoners and taking down the task force. Though my one complaint about the later half of the fight is that it's hard to believe that none of the prisoners got shot by a stray bullet, considering the amount of blind fire. The next plot point is Bullseye. Though Wilson Bethel does do a good job portraying Bullseye, his inconsistent characterization carries over from season 1. Despite killing Foggy, Bullseye is trying to get absolution for his actions by acting like a vigilante and killing members of the AVTF. He also wants to do one good deed to balance the scales for Foggy's murder by killing Vanessa since she ordered his death. But much like how Bullseye would never work with Vanessa, he wouldn't care about getting absolution. In the original series, Ben Poindexter was a psychopath who built a life of order and structure to keep him on the straight and narrow, and he needed someone to become his moral compass's North Star to base his morality on. Without a North Star, he just regressed to how he acted as a child, killing everyone who he believed wronged him, like his baseball coach because he let the other kids have a turn at pitching. And he wanted to kill his therapist because she was dying and would leave him all alone. And by the end of season 3, Dex knew Kingpin had killed his old North Star to use him. So Dex tried to kill him, Vanessa, and the FBI agents under his thumb because he saw them all as his enemies. So based on what we know of his character from the original series, Bullseye should only care about killing Wilson and Vanessa because that's how he functions. Not trying to seek absolution, do one good deed to balance the scales, or act like one of the good guys because he shouldn't care. Actually, a better explanation for why Bullseye is fashioning himself as a vigilante is if Dex made Daredevil his new North Star, but then his character would have to be consistent. And by the way, this desire to try and balance the scales goes out the window once he does his one good deed and saves the governor from an assassin. The very next episode, he tries to kill Fisk with a sniper that was set up to kill Matt and use a fake Bullseye as the shooter. Not sure how he missed, considering his superhuman aim this season, but I'll get more into that in a bit. The only reasons I can think of for why the writers for Born Again tried to push the idea of making Bullseye a semi-anti-hero is either because they completely misunderstood the character, or they found out that Punisher wouldn't be available for season 2 and tried to shape Bullseye's character to fill the hole Frank left behind. And this explanation is more likely since Bullseye is killing members of the AVTF throughout the season, but it doesn't provide him any tactical benefits. Sure, their numbers go down, at least I assume, the series doesn't really get into how many members of the task force are active, but Dex is putting himself in needless danger that gets him no closer to Fisk and Vanessa. When it comes to Bullseye's fight scenes, they're brutal, but too stylized and really forces the spectators to stretch their disbelief. Anything he gets his hands on can be a lethal weapon and ricocheted, no matter its shape. I mean, is it even possible to ricochet a thermometer? Now, I realize this is comic book accurate, but the original series made sure to add a sense of realism to Bullseye's accuracy and what he could use to kill people. This way, there was an emphasis to the danger he brought. But when we see him fight in Born Again, there isn't really a sense of danger, no matter how much blood we see on screen. We mostly get a sense of fantasy. Also, why doesn't Dex just use his gun? He has easy access to one. The only reason he didn't use a gun too often in the original series was because he was pretending to be Daredevil, and Daredevil doesn't use guns. But when he wasn't pretending to be Daredevil, he'd use a gun. But anyways, Bullseye finally kills Vanessa this season, which he should have done in the first place. But seriously, it is a genuinely tragic death as we see Vanessa's last moments with Wilson being rather wholesome as they're reminiscing about how they met. But then she asks Wilson to tell her the story again and stops speaking. Then she loses consciousness and dies. And the way I read Vanessa's dialogue when she wakes up makes me believe that the writers were trying to telegraph her brain damage, since she's acting more innocent and unaware of her surroundings. And if that was the intent, they did a good job. And her absence is felt throughout the rest of the season, as Fisk doesn't speak until his fight with Daredevil in the episode after her death. And there are multiple shots of him alone despite the fact that in the context of those scenes, he was in a position of strength. However, Vanessa's death could have had more of an emotional impact if she hadn't cheated on Wilson in the previous season. I don't know if this was for everyone, but for me, the sadness of Vanessa's passing didn't hit as hard because she was unfaithful. It also didn't help that the doctor treating her doesn't know how to talk to grieving widowers.
They that love beyond the world cannot be separated by it. Death cannot kill what never dies. Even in her final moments, she was the brightest of lights. Take solace in knowing that she is at rest now, gone to the beautiful darkness that awaits us all. It has been a sad honor accompanying you on this journey, Mr. Fisk.
Who the fuck talks like that? He's practically begging Fisk to break him in half. Oh, I see. The main consequence of Vanessa's death is that it sends Fisk on a downward spiral, and it should, but the writers seem to have misinterpreted Vanessa's relationship with Wilson, framing her as the good mob wife who was keeping her husband's rage in control, so her death sends him on a rampage. And don't get me wrong, it would, but not because she was tempering his darker impulses, as both the original series and the previous season were very clear that she was just as bad as Wilson.
When I first met you, I was fascinated by your strength. Your brutality is so clear to me. Even as you hid it from me, I wanted to observe everything you did, and as I did, I fell in love with you. When you stopped your men from speaking in front of me, I was reminded that I'm not a part of your life, not fully, and so not at all. I don't want to admire your world. I want to live inside of it, with you.
Vanessa, it's one thing to know my work, but it's another to dirty your hands with it.
My hands were never clean. If you truly want me, share your life with me. Fully.
After Vanessa's death, the stage is set for Daredevil and Kingpin's final confrontation. While public opinion has turned heavily against Fisk, he retreats to his lair where he was keeping Vanessa's boyfriend. And though he and Daredevil do have one final fight scene, it doesn't really add anything to the narrative. Whenever they fought in the original series, it was to serve a purpose, like how their first fight in Season 1 showed how brutal and ruthless Fisk is. And their fight at the end of the season delivered a sense of triumph, as Matt was able to beat Fisk and was fully defined as Daredevil. And their final fight at the end of Season 3 wasn't just a physical victory, but a moral one, as Matt was not only able to defeat both Fisk and Poindexter, but he managed to not compromise his morality. But this fight near the end of Season 2 contributes nothing to the plot, other than showing a cool fight to the spectators. But nobody gains or loses anything. And after Daredevil wins, he just walks away because they still have 2 episodes to go.
What are you going to do? Arrest me? You cannot. Kill me? You will not.
Well, see you next Tuesday.
The true end of their conflict happens in the courtroom, when Karen gets arrested and put on trial as a vigilante, and Matt comes in as her lawyer and works with Kirsten to dispute the charges of terrorism, while also using the trial to reveal Fisk's crimes to the public, thus invalidating the vigilante trial since he set it up. And if you remember Hector Ayala's trial from the previous season, you can probably guess how Karen's trial is going to be handled. Winning with feelings over facts, as Matt reveals his identity as Daredevil to turn himself into a witness for Fisk's crime of using the Northern Star to smuggle weapons into New York and then using them to arm the AVTF. But the whole reveal scene is basically a bad ripoff of A Few Good Men.
Mr. Fisk, did you or did you not orchestrate the sale of military-grade weapons to the official use of your office and then order the Northern Star to be scuttled when your plan was exposed?
Lieutenant Kendrick ordered the code red, didn't he? Because that's what you told Lieutenant Kendrick to do.
Object! And when it went bad, you cut these guys loose! Your Honor, you had markers inside a phony transport! Your Honor, you doctored the logbook! Damn it, Captain! You coerced the doctor!
Consider yourself in contempt!
Colonel Jessup! Did you order the code red?
Do not answer that.
Why not answer?
Do not answer it.
Answer it, sir.
I will answer it! You don't have to answer that question.
I'll answer the question.
You don't get to know what comes through our port. All you need to know is that I'm running this city and it's thriving.
Son, we live in a world that has walls, and those walls have to be guarded by men with guns. Who's gonna do it? You? You, Lieutenant Weinberg? I have a greater responsibility than you can possibly fathom.
Now, the reason that scene worked in the movie was because during Colonel Jessup's testimony, Lieutenant Caffey managed to catch him lying.
If you gave an order that Santiago wasn't to be touched, and your orders are always followed, then why would Santiago be in danger? Why would it be necessary to transfer him off the base?
Santiago was a substandard Marine. He was being transferred.
That's not what you said. You said he was being transferred because he was in grave danger.
That's correct.
You said he was in danger. I said grave danger. You said, is there any
recall what I
I
said.
can have the court reporter read back to you.
I know what I said. I don't have to have it read back to me like I'm...
Why the two orders?
Sometimes men take matters into their own hands.
No, sir. You made it clear just a moment ago that your men never take matters in their own hands. Your men follow orders or people die. So Santiago shouldn't have been in any danger at all, should he have, Colonel?
But Matt hasn't done that with Fisk. He's based every accusation on the fact that Daredevil is a witness to all of Fisk's crimes. Now, at the start of the trial, Kirsten and Matt are doing a good job as lawyers by building a foundation to their arguments with the AVTF's testimonies. They're asking questions about the task force's mission statement, who they report to, and they even address the fight they had with Daredevil and Punisher in Matt's apartment back in season 1.
Can you tell me about those scars on your face?
I got these in a firefight with Daredevil and Frank Castle.
At Mr. Murdock's apartment.
Yes.
Why were you there?
We were performing a welfare check.
Welfare check? With assault rifles and MRAP personnel carriers? I don't know, seems like a lot of hardware for a blind lawyer.
This is great because Matt and Kirsten are using their testimonies to reveal that the AVTF was sent to kill Matt under Fisk's orders. But then Kirsten jumps the gun and accuses Cole of murdering Hector.
Did he tell you to kill Hector Ayala? Or maybe that was Mayor Fisk.
Objection. Immaterial, misleading, and prejudicial.
But apparently this strategy worked, since the governor is watching, and this is what convinces her to begin the process to suspend Fisk. And that's basically their plan for each testimony. Ask legitimate questions, but then jump to fingering the mayor.
What are they accusing you of?
You're cute.
And apparently this all acts as a strong foundation for Matt outing himself to prove Fisk's guilt. Like I said, feelings over facts. Now, I like the idea of Matt outing his identity to bring down Fisk and save Karen, especially a lot more than him outing Hector's identity without his consent. But my problem with it is it not only has a weak foundation that would more likely result in Matt being arrested on the spot, but it was also the plan from the beginning when it could have been presented as a last resort. Especially when you consider the other options and strategies Matt and Kirsten had at their disposal based on the canonical events that happened throughout Born Again. Like the videos of all the prisoners from Red Hook, which were revealed to the public, where they talk about what the AVTF did to them. Now, there's a good chance they would have been treated like Christoffy's video testimony, which I'll get into in a bit, since the DA wouldn't be able to cross-examine them as witnesses. But their existence would have opened the line of questioning on whether these individuals were arrested by the AVTF, and whether their arrests were justified considering these so-called vigilantes don't have an alter ego. Plus, Matt can bring up the fact that several of the individuals arrested were New York's wealthy elite, some of whom were arrested before martial law was declared. This creates reasonable doubt to the judges on whether Karen should be tried as a vigilante if the AVTF have no integrity, since they just call anyone they arrest vigilantes. There's also Heather Glenn's testimony on her evaluation on Karen's mental stability, as there's a tangible argument to be made that Heather's evaluation is biased, since she was almost killed by Muse and he was labeled a vigilante. So Matt and Kirsten can call her objectivity into question since she's been traumatized. Matt can even recount how it was Daredevil who saved her from Muse, since Karen is being charged on her association with him, and this act of heroism would call into question why he would commit acts of terror. Finally, there's Christoffy's video testimony. In the actual trial, it was deemed immaterial since Christoffy wasn't in court and there was no one other than Daredevil who could corroborate his story. And this is technically true, as the opposing counsel can't cross-examine a pre-recorded testimony, so it alone isn't enough to prove Karen's innocence and Fisk's guilt. However, it is possible that Matt could use the footage to open a new line of testimonies from the task force. Though Christoffy went missing along with the 2 US Marshals guarding him, his testimony can be proven truthful considering Christoffy named his captain as a co-conspirator, and the captain was publicly arrested by the AVTF, who are confirmed to take all their orders from Fisk. And since he was killed, the task force can't use him to discredit Christoffy. Now, I'm not saying this would work, but I would have liked to have seen Matt at least try harder before resorting to out his identity. The conflict ends with Fisk trying to incite a riot, but the citizens instead rise up against him, while the Attorney General forces him to renounce his American citizenship and be exiled from New York. After Kingpin kills his way through a group of rioters, Matt manages to convince him to take the deal, while Matt is sent to prison for being a vigilante. Now, the biggest problem with how the conflict resolves is that Matt and the AG would never offer a corrupt mayor with Fisk's level of criminal history exile. Now, Fisk's exile could have worked if he was instead fleeing the country to escape prosecution, as it would give the season finale a bittersweet ending, because though Fisk will never face justice, he'll spend the rest of his days alone and can never go home again. But the reason the show gives us as to why Matt and the AG made the deal is because Fisk managed to get out of prison the last 2 times he was arrested.
Well, you do what you do and this whole thing starts over again.
But the AG has the evidence of Fisk's crimes during Born Again, so there's a better chance the charges will stick, especially since the assassin sent to kill the governor somehow didn't die and confirmed Kingpin sent him, and multiple individuals had just witnessed him kill a group of people with his bare hands. And with the whole task force being arrested, any of them can flip on Fisk, since they were witnesses to his arms dealing and the murder of a police commissioner. And as I said in the last video, prison is hazardous for cops. At this point, Fisk should be under arrest and awaiting trial in jail. Hell, Christoffy's testimony may not have been enough for Karen's vigilante trial, but it could have been used for Fisk's corruption trial, especially with Daredevil himself corroborating it. And Matt would never agree to let Fisk go without facing justice for his crimes. Sure, he let Vanessa go free after knowing she had Raynor killed, but the reason he did that was because Matt used her freedom as leverage for keeping Fisk in prison and not revealing his identity. But now that Vanessa is dead and Matt's identity is public, Fisk has nothing restraining him. The reason Matt lets Fisk go is because he believes Fisk does want what's best for the city. And this season keeps pushing the idea of how the battle for New York is really between Matt and Fisk, and how people like Foggy and Vanessa get caught in the middle.
You know, we tell ourselves this is about the city, it's about New York. I'm not so sure that's true anymore. Is it? This fight, it is poison. It destroys everything. The city, the people we love. Nobody wins. We have to end it now.
I believe you love this city same as me. We have the opportunity to give it peace.
First of all, Fisk stopped caring about New York after he became a fugitive back in season 1. So Matt's belief that Fisk wants to do what's right by the city and his outbursts about giving everything he had to New York doesn't match what we know about the character.
I have done everything for you. I've given you my heart and my soul. I fought for you, and I stand here now, and I still fight. This city doesn't deserve a better tomorrow. It deserves to drown in its filth.
Secondly, both Foggy and Vanessa's death had nothing to do with Daredevil and Kingpin's conflict. Foggy was murdered because he would have accidentally exposed Vanessa's smuggling operation, and Vanessa died because Bullseye wanted to make up for killing Foggy under her orders. So this idea that they're both collateral damage in Matt and Fisk's war is completely false. Finally, this idea that the battle between Matt and Fisk is the root cause for so much suffering is an oversimplification of their overall conflict.
Imagine if we'd never met.
Oh, I know the answer. It wouldn't have changed anything. Matt became Daredevil because he couldn't stand by and do nothing when good people suffered and the system couldn't save them. And Fisk wanted to take over the criminal underworld in New York because he thought it was the only way to make it what he believed to be perfect. Them coming to blows was inevitable because Fisk's methods on perfecting New York involved innocent people getting hurt or killed, and Matt wouldn't let that happen. They didn't fight just because they didn't like each other. When it comes to Matt's characterization in Season 2, it's a lot more palatable than what we got in Season 1, though that's mostly because he's in this suit for most of the season. Matt's character not only gets assassinated from this asinine decision to let Kingpin flee the country, he gets retroactively regressed during the flashback episode. Though the flashback scenes do manage to recapture the feeling of the original series, they're not able to recapture their material since they flip Matt and Foggy's morality. Back before they started their own law firm, Matt and Foggy are sent to represent Foggy's childhood bully Lionel, who's being charged with drug possession, dealing, and several other crimes. But because he works for Fisk, when he goes to prison, the people inside will kill him. However, Foggy discovers an error in the search warrant, so the evidence is inadmissible. But Matt doesn't care that Lionel will be killed in prison because he was guilty of the charges, and if he's let out, he'll probably commit more crimes. While Foggy wants to help him because it's the right thing to do and it gives Lionel the chance to redeem himself. Now this retcon doesn't fit the established history between Matt and Foggy, because in the original series around this time, Matt was the one who believed they should focus more on helping their clients, while Foggy just wanted to focus on making money.
Is this what you want, to be a part of that? Protecting corporations from people that need help?
It doesn't have to be like that. We get a toehold, make partner.
And then in 10, 15 years, we what? Change the system from the inside? On our way to work in our Bentleys?
You know how many of the other interns would kill for a real spot here? Murder us in our sleep without a second thought.
Maybe those aren't the kind of people we should be working with.
Don't get me wrong, Foggy and Matt both act as each other's moral compasses, but for different reasons. Matt made Foggy realize that he wouldn't be okay using his law degree only helping himself, rather than the people who couldn't afford it. And Foggy kept Matt from going full devil. The main purpose of the flashback is to provide the context for why Matt puts so much emphasis on mercy, which is why he would help Bullseye despite the fact he killed his best friend, and why Matt would let Fisk leave the country despite the countless people he's killed, because Foggy would have wanted them to have a second chance to be better. But this retcon feels artificial since Matt never had this apathetic mentality.
We must dissent from the indifference. We must dissent from the apathy. We must dissent from the
fear. Yeah, I know. You've read it a million times.
And this emphasis on mercy shows that the writers don't understand Matt's mentality as a superhero. Though Matt did believe people deserved a second chance to be better, he wasn't naive enough to believe everyone wanted to be better, which is why he had no problems savagely beating his more detestable enemies. The only reason he didn't just kill them is because of his Catholic faith and respect for the law system. There's also a plot point in Mac's character that gets introduced at the end of episode 1, but never gets brought up again. When Matt comes to save Cherry from the AVTF, he gets a heart attack, which causes Matt to have a PTSD episode, since the sound of Cherry's heart failing brings him back to the night he heard Foggy's heart stop. Now, I'm not against the death of Matt's best friend having a long-lasting effect on his mental health, but my problem with it is that this is the only instance of Matt having PTSD in the whole show. And this isn't the first time Matt's heard a failing heartbeat. He was in a very similar circumstance with Angela back in season 1 when she was getting her blood drained by Muse. The only reason it happens is because the writers needed Daredevil to lose the fight with the AVTF and have Bullseye save him. Actually, Daredevil having PTSD after Foggy's death would have been a better reason for why Matt quit being Daredevil, instead of not trusting himself after trying to kill Bullseye. When it comes to Daredevil's fight scenes this season, they start out okay, but like with Bullseye, they start to get too fantastical. Now, in some instances, it's relatively harmless, like when Daredevil punches his opponent at the same time he's getting punched, causing himself or both opponents to be pushed back. And his first couple of fights show him using sneak attacks and taking down opponents one by one. But as the season progresses, he throws caution to the wind and just rushes into battle, in some cases walking into full view of the heavily armed task force. When in the original series, they showed off as early as episode 2 how dangerous it is, even for someone of Daredevil's skill, to take multiple people head on. And it gets even more ridiculous by the end, as Daredevil manages to fight entire squads of the AVTF after getting shot in the leg the previous day. Though this season's fight scenes rely less on CGI, they tend to be more about spectacle than realism and skill. In my previous video, I touched on how absurd it was that Fisk became mayor of New York despite being publicly arrested twice. And going back to Fisk's exile, the reason the writers keep giving Fisk an out is so they can keep bringing him back, which really dilutes the gravitas the character brings by causing the spectators to grow tired of him. Especially since every time Fisk gets brought back, it not only lessens the legal system Matt puts so much faith in as they allow a violent criminal to escape justice, Fisk becomes a bad copy of his original incarnation. The Kingpin used to be scary because he was proactive and thought 3 moves ahead, so any plans Daredevil would come up with would already be countered and used to further his own plans.
Listen, mate, you know what happens when you make a plan? Fisk has already thought of it, and he's made it part of his plan.
But now, we only see Kingpin react to attacks against him and not actively set plans in motion to counter Daredevil. Him telling the city that Matt Murdock is a hero for taking a bullet for him and is now missing so the city will look for him, using himself as bait for Bullseye and Daredevil in Fogwell's gym, and then trying to kill Matt during Karen's trial. All these plans are basic and reactive, while also not having any bonus benefit for Fisk's agenda. The only intimidating thing about Fisk in Born Again is his superhuman strength. Which, say it with me now, is too exaggerated. Ever since his appearance in Hawkeye, the MCU has showcased Kingpin having comic-accurate strength. But like Bullseye, what made Fisk scary was that his brutality looked real for a man of his size, and it was genuinely terrifying to see him pop off because of how smart and calculating he was. Plus, comic book Kingpin had super strength because he was the size of the mountain. Not the show version, the book version. Anyways, we do get Karen this season, and she basically gets the same treatment as the rest of the cast. On the positive side, she has learned some basic self-defense. Controversial, I know, but considering her extensive history of almost dying, I'd be surprised if she didn't learn how to fight. Now, she isn't on Matt's level of skill, so Karen isn't going out as Lady Daredevil, at least not in this season, but she's effective enough to take down a single combatant if she gets the drop on them. However, her investigation skills, which is where her agency came from, is all done off screen. When it comes to Karen's characterization, she has been completely assassinated. Shocking, I know. Where she has thrown away her character development about murder and how it changes people and wants to kill Bullseye and Fisk. Basically a reverse of what happened in Season 3, where Matt wants to kill Fisk because he's grown too powerful, and Karen tries to show him there's another way.
That is what separates us from him.
Are we really still that separate?
Yes, we are. We are separate. It is not up to us to take a life.
I know! Right, I pay every day for what I did to Wesley. I still have fucking nightmares. But the difference is I don't regret it. It was him or me. And what if that's what it's like with you and Fisk? Him or you? What if this doesn't end until one of you goes down?
I can't think about it that way.
Well, you're gonna have to. He has proven that he will not hesitate.
I can't let Fisk go.
Killing anyone, even Fisk, it will change everything that you feel about yourself.
But unlike how in the final episode of that season, where Matt's struggle with killing Fisk gets resolved, we don't really follow up on this idea of how Foggy's murder has made Karen so jaded. When it comes to Karen's relationship with Matt, it feels rushed despite having so much history together. Though they did date briefly in Season 2 of the Netflix show, by the end of Season 3 they're pretty much just close friends. And though at the start of Born Again they did flirt with the idea of getting back together, they were estranged for a year, and Matt had started a new relationship with Heather. I know 6 months have passed between seasons, but by making them be together without the appropriate build-up, most of the spectators can't get too invested in their relationship. And while we're on the subject, I want to talk about the scene where Karen meets Heather. In between court proceedings, Heather is doing a psych evaluation on Karen, but the whole thing is rigged because of Heather's trauma with Muse, which I'll expand on soon. But instead of Karen using her own traumatic history to connect with Heather and convince her that Fisk is evil, she decides to get catty because they both dated the same man.
I'm in love with this man. He's completely inaccessible. He's distant, complicated. There are nights where I fall asleep in bed next to him, totally unsure of who he is. Worries me.
As it should.
It's also totally hot. I'm sure you can understand. So, what does that say about me?
And then Heather slaps the snot out of her when she does try to connect on an emotional level.
You were friends with Vanessa Fisk, weren't you?
I'm not answering any personal questions. That's unprofessional.
Yeah, well, she had my friend Foggy killed. Did you know that? Is that in those files? That really hurt you, didn't he? Enough that you'd run to them to feel safe. Please. Look, I get it. I'm so sorry.
Honestly, it feels like this scene was written by two different people, and the fact that Karen was beaten while in custody doesn't have an impact on her trial.
Dr. Glenn, did you strike Miss Page during your evaluation last night?
Objection. Absolutely not.
Sustained. No further questions.
And speaking of Heather Glenn, though her character in Season 1 was relatively bland, Season 2 does give her an interesting character arc, where her trauma from Muse's attack makes her associate other vigilantes with him. So she starts gravitating more towards Kingpin's rhetoric and rigs their psyche vows to make them appear dangerous to the judges. But where the writers go wrong with her character is making her the new muse by the end of the season. And her descent into villainy feels out of place and a little weird as she starts to lose control of her impulses, with her stealing one of Vanessa's earrings after she dies, consensually strangling Buck in the same way she was strangled, then beating up Karen. Now, Heather's study of vigilantes in Season 1 could have been a factor for her transformation, but nothing we saw from her suggests that this loss of impulse control is the natural direction of her character. If anything, the moment where she put on Muse's mask and became her true self should have been pushed to Season 3, and given more time to build up so her transformation was more believable. Though the Punisher is absent in Season 2, Jessica Jones makes a return appearance. However, she's basically given the same treatment as Frank, appearing midway through the season, says she can't help Matt, but does help him in the season finale. But I do appreciate that the writers at least gave Jessica an understandable reason for why her assistance was limited, as Charles had taken her baby daddy Luke overseas to work for him, leaving her alone to look after her daughter. And after Danielle was born, Jessica's powers seemed to turn off and on without her control. And with that limitation, she can't bulldoze her way through the AVTF. But in the final fight, her powers remain consistently on, and the tension her limitation brought vanishes. Also, much like Matt and Karen's relationship this season, Jessica's relationship with Luke feels very rushed, as the last time we saw them, they weren't a couple, but now they have a child together. I know a few years have passed, but it's still jarring. There's also this one line where Jessica suggests to Matt that he should kill the Kingpin, which she would never do.
Fisk isn't gonna stop unless someone puts him down.
It's only one scene, but like Matt, Jessica went through her own arc about whether certain people deserve to die. Sure, she did kill people in her show, but it left her damaged, and I don't see her wishing that on anyone else, especially not Matt. And like Karen's jaded nature this season, it doesn't get followed up on. Based on how The Punisher was handled, Jessica's storyline is likely a setup for Season 3 or whatever future project Marvel Studios wants to push. And honestly, I get the feeling Born Again is just bringing in the other Netflix characters to test the waters and see if they're profitable in future projects instead of being a service to the narrative. Especially since Luke Cage and Danny Rand have been confirmed to appear in Season 3 of Born Again. And considering Disney only uses the Netflix continuity to draw in its fan base without adhering to it, I don't have a lot of faith in how the characters will be handled. Now let's delve into the smaller roles of the series. Throughout the season, BB's B-plot, if you will, is that while using her platform for Fisk's propaganda, she's using her proximity to him to not only give intel to Daredevil and Karen about the Northern Star, but also run a smear broadcast against Fisk, entitled Mayor Kingpin, where she calls out all of his illicit dealings. And Kingpin tasks Buck and Dan to find the leak. No idea why he wouldn't immediately assume BB was responsible, or even let her get that close to him, considering he murdered her uncle in the original series. Now, the first problem with BB's plot is that we don't really see that much of her actually doing any investigation or espionage. The most we get is her using the same tricks we saw in Season 1, where she manipulates Dan into giving her info. And all the intel she acquires for Daredevil and the Mayor Kingpin broadcast happens off screen, which I really think does her character a disservice. Because we could have seen an interesting dynamic between her and Karen, similar to how Karen learned how to be an investigator from BB's Uncle Ben. But all we get is this one scene between them for the bare minimum of lip service. The second problem is that though the Mayor Kingpin broadcast calls out Fisk's crimes, BB doesn't use any actual evidence to back up her claims. And this was a massive struggle Ben Urich had to go through in order to convince the city that Fisk was a bad guy. Yet somehow at the end of the season, BB's broadcast manages to rally the city against Fisk, while not having any evidence to help her cause. Which leads me back to my statement about the writers prioritizing feelings over facts, making it hard to believe that BB's broadcast would ever be taken seriously. When we first meet Daniel, not her, him, he came off as a TikTok-addicted young person who was comically inept. But because he fully bought what Fisk was selling, he was brought into the inner circle. However, Dan actually has a pretty good arc in Season 2. He starts out fully believing Fisk's rhetoric and benefits greatly from his loyalty. But as the season goes on, Dan starts to see how bad Fisk is and is dragged deeper into his illegal activities. And when Buck becomes suspicious about BB being the leak, Dan finally does the right thing by keeping her from Buck, and gets killed for it. If I have anything positive to say about Dan's character, is that he's one of the few characters that attempts to have moral complexity in this show. But even though Dan's character has improved, he still makes some really dumb decisions. Despite finding out he was used by BB to send confidential information to the press in Season 1, and has continued to do so in Season 2, Dan doesn't become more cautious with what he says to her, and she ends up using him to send confidential information to the press. Again. And when confirming that BB is leaking information to Karen, he falls on his sword to save her when he didn't have to. Though Buck believes BB is the leak, which isn't that much of a leap considering her family history, he gives Dan the chance to prove she isn't by having him give her false information, which if used in the next broadcast would prove her to be the mole. And though Dan does give BB the false info, she doesn't publish it because she's starting to have second thoughts about manipulating her friend. So there's no reason for Buck to still be suspicious or for Dan to die. And it sucks because Dan's character arc would have been perfect despite his flaws in Season 1 if he didn't have these flaws in Season 2. Finally, I want to talk about Hector's niece, Angela Del Toro. After her aunt gets arrested by the AVTF, try saying that 5 times fast, Angela takes her uncle's amulet and starts helping the resistance. Now, as much as I appreciate seeing other vigilantes helping out Daredevil, I would have liked to have seen Matt act more as a mentor figure before sending her into dangerous situations, especially since the last time she was in a dangerous situation, she almost died. Now, granted, the first time Angela helps out, it's without his knowledge, and she's mostly running information, but afterwards, it's very irresponsible of Matt to encourage her to put her neck on the line to help the resistance. Especially when she's going up against the fully armed task force. Sure, she has the amulet, but so did Hector when he got shot. A fact that doesn't even cause Angela's aunt to be the least bit apprehensive that her teenage niece is following Hector's footsteps.
Who does that?
But I think a way around this would have been for Matt to help train her and ensure she only fought battles she would definitely win, while saving the large conflicts for Season 3. And it would have created a unique relationship between the two of them since, around her age, Matt went through a similar experience with his father, and he could have used his experiences to help keep Angela from making the same mistakes he made early in his career. Though Season 2 has a more defined direction, Born Again still doesn't understand what made Netflix's Daredevil so great. Sure, Born Again is more comic book accurate, but the original series understood the comic book spirit. Born Again doesn't understand why Matt was a compelling character, or why Fisk was a terrifying villain, and it still doesn't know how to write an interesting legal drama. It doesn't even understand American law or how politics work, which are the driving forces of the narrative. Thankfully, the fight scenes rely less on CGI, but they can be too stylized, and their purpose is mainly for entertainment, rather than a service to the story. And the story itself is an anchor around the characters' necks, preventing them from acting intelligent or consistent as they are twisted and warped to suit the hollow narrative's direction. In other words, it's the same quality we got in Season 1.